Well, welcome everyone to BareLead. And if you're tuning in for the first time, this is where we strip down leadership to its raw, unfiltered, unabashed truths. I'm Pooja, and today we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic, which is around exploration, the role of exploration in leadership. And my guest today is Claire. Claire, it's an honor to have you here on BareLead. And before we dive into the theme, and for those who may not already be familiar with your outstanding journey, could you please share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. So I'm Claire. I am currently CEO of Polarsteps, which is the travel app that lets you plan your adventures, track them, and share them with your friends and family when you're on the adventures, and then relive them for the rest of your life. I've been in tech startups really for almost all my career, and most recently was at What Three Words, which is the mapping and address related company in the UK. So I have had huge luck to be able to work across such interesting industries and different countries around the world. And but now I'm based in Amsterdam. And the team is about 100 people, just around about 100. We've just moved into a new office and we're in kind of scaling phase. We've got about 22 million users. So things are kicking off.
Fantastic. And clearly you've explored very different worlds throughout your career. What has each transition taught you about leading through unfamiliar terrain?
Yeah, I think, it's always unfamiliar in a startup or a scale up because you're always going in and things are being written as you're going and nothing. If you're really early, there's just nothing and you're making it up. And I think the interesting thing about this current one at Polarsteps was that I actually didn't join right at the beginning. So having kind of been very early in things, either starting them myself or joining very early in other places, Polarsteps was actually a really established company and it was an unknown in a really different way. So when you're starting from scratch, you're hiring everyone and you're going, I know how I want to build the culture from the ground up and these are the kind of people I want to hire. This is quite different when you join a team of 40 people
Yeah.
and they've all got their existing culture, which is one of the reasons I actually loved it and wanted to join. But that was a really interesting change, which is that you're exploring instead of going into totally new ground and how do I start from scratch, you're actually going, how do I come in and lead something that I'm taking over from other people? And how do I preserve all the things that are special about it? One of the things about Polarsteps is that the culture here is pretty unique. It's just not like anywhere else I've ever been. And I was so desperate not to ruin that. That's the thing you have to know. If you're coming in as a leader, you've got to be like, I'm being gifted this really precious thing, which is an amazing culture and amazing people. And I have a real responsibility to take care of that. And I still feel that responsibility. And that is a real different leadership muscle to
Yeah.
starting from scratch and hiring your people and knowing exactly how you're going to do it from the ground up. Totally different to come in and take something over when it's already very successful.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point you make there because I think the startup energy at 40 and startup energy at 100 are very different. The risk taking is very different. You have to be an explorer in a very different way. And I think it also requires a fair bit of restraint, right? Because you don't want to mess up, like you mentioned, whatever already is working. So, in your opinion, Claire, like, do you believe that great leaders are actually, at the end of the day, explorers? And if so, what qualities really allow them to navigate uncertainty and challenge assumptions and discover new possibilities? Because you're not in a static environment, specifically with AI. Every day, some workflow is changing. So, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so I think definitely being a leader is so much about exploring because you're exploring so much about yourself, which is like any adventure. It's when we travel, we explore things, we learn things about ourselves, especially when things go wrong or things are unexpected and you have to rethink your plans. And that is very, very similar to being a leader, especially a leader in a startup environment where stuff changes all the time. You can have a plan and then you're like, oh, okay, something's happened over there, which might be a good thing, which, my previous life was something like you're on the front page of the BBC and you've got way more downloads than you were expecting that day. So they might be lovely things or they might be difficult things and you've got to constantly kind of rethink, and that's very much the exploratory feeling. But I think the key thing is that when you ask about great leaders, I don't think great leaders are the ones that do it solo. I don't think solo exploring makes for a great leader. I think the really important thing is to find people around you, your leadership team, your management team, your colleagues who you can trust and you love working with but learning from. That's the key thing. And yet you're willing to learn and listen because there will always be things you can learn from the people around you. And also to go and find leaders to learn from out there in the world. And for me, that means listening to every podcast, reading every single book I can get my hands on about startups and tech and culture and leadership and how to do those things. And then finding real life humans who've done this before and begging them to spend time with me. I'm really lucky that I've had so many people over the years help me and give advice and support. And that has been a huge part of it. But that is the key thing for me, is that if you're going to go on this exploration, you need fellow travelers and you need to be willing to talk to people and learn from them on the way, because otherwise you're just going to make the same mistakes that everyone else could have told you not to make. You'll still make mistakes, but it's nice to get so much feedback and input. So it's not a solo exploration. It's very much a group trip.
Yeah. I like what you mentioned there because it seems like you're just expanding your surface area of knowns so that you don't fumble, if I can use that word. But sometimes moments are just uncharted and they're unknown. So can you share a moment, it could be personal as well, when you stepped into the unknown and forced you to grow as a leader in a way that staying in the same place wouldn't have ever done for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think one of the things here has been so I stepping into the unknown was also moving countries. So I moved from London and I loved London and I was very happy. But in order to be CEO of Polarsteps, you need to be in Amsterdam, which is where the team is. And so there was so much that was unknown about that journey. And I remember it was June a couple of years ago, and how strange it felt to come into this place with this team, with this amazing team who were just doing such wonderful things, who I was just getting to know. And I think the big learning for me about that period was actually about shutting up. So, I'd been so used to my previous role to just knowing the company inside out. I knew everything about it. I'd been there for so long and I'd hired all these people, and I was sort of, at least in the team, seen as an expert on some things. They would come and they would ask you, the answer. And you're suddenly going to being the opposite, which is, the least. Out of that entire company, the least. And so a big, real experience for me was basically coming in with a mindset of humility, which is everybody here knows more than me. And we all have this temptation when we want to add value to be like, have you thought of this? Have you had this idea? And I forced myself at the beginning, and partly I forced myself by having a physical notebook. And I was like, bring the physical notebook in the meeting and write notes. So now I don't do that anymore because I have things in my head and I can remember them. But I was like, if you bring that, and I had 3 notebooks that I filled up in my first few months, was just bring them in and force yourself to write notes. Because that way, if you're writing notes, you have to be listening and you can't be thinking, oh, I've got something to say. And it was tough because I've come from, a world in which I'm used to having lots of opinions and saying lots of things and giving lots of direction. But I think it was a really, really valuable learning experience for me, which was this much more humble. I've just got to come in and I've learned from you all, and please help me learn. I was very lucky that the colleagues were so open-minded and helpful and kind, and they just really shared so much with me and they spent so much time. But that was a very different experience for me. And something I hadn't ever really done before because I'd never really joined an organization like this at leadership level. So it was a really good experience for me to learn a very different skill of kind of exploring with humility instead of just coming in and having lots of opinions.
Yeah. I think what you mentioned there, exploring with humility, is like effectively, I would probably want to say curiosity, just, putting all your reservations out of the window and saying, okay, I just want to know more. But I think, in your position, it's also a bit risky as far as I've noticed, because sometimes leaders come in, they have a long lead time where they're just saying, okay, tell me what you think and tell me what you think. And then after a point, they're like, no, but actually, I just want you to raise the bar here, tell us what to do and lead the vision. So there is a great balance between curiosity and also just acting with a lot of conviction. So how do you balance staying, open to new possibilities while also having to really make decisions? Because at the end of the day, you have a title to defend.
Yeah, I think this is particularly interesting in Dutch culture because Dutch culture is very human centric. And there's this really wonderful thing that I think is so valuable, and I wish other countries had it as well. I'm sure others do, but I think my experience of this is really positive, which is that everybody's voice matters. And it doesn't matter what position you are, it doesn't matter what it says in your title, everybody's opinion matters in a very real way, not in a I'm just going to send out a survey and ignore what you've said. This is very real here that everybody's voice matters. And so that was a really interesting thing for me because it means you're coming in and you have to be curious, because if you're not curious, you're going to hear anyway. Like, you're going to hear what people think. So you might as well embrace it and like see it as such a positive thing, which is, what do you think? Tell me what you think. Give me your view. And I send out every now and again surveys to the whole company to just be like, what strategic stuff do you think we're missing? What opportunities? What risks? And it's one of my favorite things because people, a lot of the time, it confirms what you think. You're like, great, I'm really aligned. I totally agree. And sometimes there'll be something in there and you're like, that's such a good reframe. And I've been grappling with this in my head. And this person's just written it in 3 lines in a really clear way. So I think there's the curiosity thing. It's natural in a company like Polarsteps and natural in a Dutch company, I think, more than many other countries. So that's been really nice. But yeah, the conviction piece is then hard because then you've got to go, I'm going to listen to everyone's view. And at some point, I've got to make a decision because that is my job. And I think a thing that I found helpful in doing that is not pretending that I know the right answer. Because often there's like 5 options, and often they're all good options, and you're just deciding which one to do. And sometimes the margins are like this between them. Sometimes they're like this, but then that's an easier decision and everyone can kind of see it. But often what will happen, there'll be 4 or 5 options. They're all marginally better or worse in different ways. And you basically just have to decide. And that's where I think your job as leader is just to declare that and just be like, look, I don't know if we're right here. I don't know, but this is the theory. This is the theory I'm going to explore. This is the hypothesis. And I'm willing to be wrong. I'm willing to say, we're going to try this. And if after 3 months I'm wrong, I'm happy to put my hands up and say I'm wrong. And I think that's the key part of it, is that you can be curious, you have to act with conviction to get stuff done, but then you have to be willing to close the loop, which is to say, you know what, this hypothesis was right and this has worked, or, you know what, I think I got that one wrong. And there are loads of times I've got things wrong. And I think just being open about that with the team helps them trust you when you're later saying, okay, we're going to make this decision, because so often there isn't one very clear right decision. And I'm not pretending there is. I'm just saying it's my job to make decisions. This is the decision. We're going to go with it. And the team are great. They're here. They're really good at going, loads and loads of input. Okay, we're in, let's go and let's run and let's make it happen.
Yeah. That's amazing, because what you mentioned there is just naming the trade-offs, saying what you won't do, testing out assumptions, and then just owning up, whatever the outcome is. So that's a rare skill also, because when I run sprints, for example, with leaders, one of the things that I work on is just establishing a common culture and language with leadership on what are the trade-offs you're actually making? How are you acting and exercising judgment with a lot of unknowns? And I think a lot of people there lack the conviction to say that, okay, if this goes wrong, I'll own it. And I think that kind of keeps people in a state of paralysis, and they're constantly having discussions, never arriving at a decision. So love that example. And I also want to touch upon this fact, because you mentioned, 40 to 100, and this kind of a culture, if it's really in your DNA, it's really hard to scale. So as how do you really build a culture that keeps curiosity and experimentation alive? Because at some point in time, there is inertia to just continue acting the same way, or just say that, okay, I'm tired, I just want directions, I don't want to be curious anymore. How do you keep that culture alive?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So we are slightly benefiting, or probably hugely benefiting, from the fact that we are working in travel. So
Mm,
one thing that happens is, because we're a consumer app in travel, everybody who works here uses the app,
yeah.
and everybody uses it in their personal life. Everyone's friends use it. So that really helps, because what it means is, if you're a traveler, you're probably quite curious by nature. If you're out there, and we're not talking about, people don't use our app if what they're doing is getting on a plane, going to a resort and coming back. You do not need Polarsteps for that. We don't add any value for there. You can put those pictures on Instagram. You don't need to plan the trip. You're getting on one plane, you're going to one hotel, you're going back. Whereas we're all about multi-destination travel that helps you be curious. It helps you be open-minded and adventurous. And so one thing is, it's kind of built into the people who apply, or the people who want to work here. They're probably curious and open-minded by nature because they're travelers. So that really helps, because that means, it's a real lovely, and it's a wonderful thing about direct to consumer. You're not selling a B2B SaaS thing that's really hard to get excited about. This is something that everyone's excited about. It does mean that the feedback and the ideas channels are very busy, because everybody has feedback because they use it as a user, which is wonderful. So that's one thing. So that's default. I think the other pieces are just being really conscious about this, and particularly in hiring. So we actually have a values stage when we do our hiring. So we have a team and values bit where we're specifically testing that stuff. So a lot of our values are about curiosity, open-mindedness. One of them is enjoy the ride. These kind of things, which are like enjoy the adventure. But so the key one that I guess is relevant here is explorers at heart. So we're all explorers at heart, and we literally test for that. We have an interview that tests for, are you an explorer at heart? Are you curious? Are you open-minded? And so that key thing is, when you're hiring, you can't just hire for competencies. You can't just hire for skills. You have to go, what are the cultural things we care about in this company and we want to keep alive? And we just did a bit of a rework of our values recently, and it's really nice to see people, they really do, in this company, more than many others I've worked in, it really does have the culture very much alive and real, and people talk about it, and they have little emojis they react on Slack when someone does something that's like that, which is lovely. Those are some of the things, and then some of it is just designing rituals and things around it. So Explorers at Heart, I think we have this lovely ritual we have, which is that every year on the anniversary month that you joined Polarsteps, you spin a wheel, and it will land somewhere that one of our users has been, and we'll pay for your train or flight ticket. And that is part of saying, we want you to be explorers at heart, and we want you to explore the world, but we also want to enable that. Like, we just want to pay for your tickets so that you can do that. And so part of it is also finding rituals that create those behaviors, and not just relying on writing some values down on a wall or a piece of paper, but actually saying, what are the rituals we do? And we have loads of these that the people and ops team do, which really make the culture and the values feel alive and really protect it as we grow.
That's amazing. As a person who's been in HR for a very long time, it's always amazing to see values and culture in action and how you reinforce it with rituals. Because HR cannot and should not be doing it alone. You know, it's always the business, it's always the people who should be doing it. So I really love that. And Claire, it seems like, when I'm observing you, when I'm listening to you, and I sense the enthusiasm, I feel the energy, and it feels like, this role kind of brings you in your flow state. But at some point in time, it could have also been the edge of the unknown for you. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of leaders, looking back on their journey, if you could just guide them through, what would you say to those leaders who are standing at the edge of their next unknown?
Yeah, I think the key thing I would say is stand there holding hands with a bunch of other people. Don't feel that you have to do this on your own, because even if you're doing a totally new industry or a totally new thing, I mean, no one's ever successfully built something like Polarsteps before. It's so new. We have no playbook. We can't copy anyone. We're out there at the front on our own doing this. But there are people who've built other things, and there will be people who can help you when you take that leap. So you don't need to just stand there and feel like you're like facing this void on your own and taking this big leap, because there are communities of so many people. And especially I find, especially women, I've had so much luck in my life with women mentors and leaders who I've been able to reach out for help and who've helped me so much and given me so much advice. And even my big sister, she's also a tech entrepreneur, and she and I always help each other. And I'm always texting her being like, how do I solve this problem? And she's usually got a brilliant answer. And so the key thing is that the unknown journeys can be terrifying if you're trying to do them alone. But if you're surrounding yourself with people who are going to help you, it's such a joy. And it's the most amazing feeling. And like landing in at Polarsteps, I was so, of course, it was a huge thing. Move countries, take over this responsibility of taking over this wonderful company, which is so loved. I mean, Polarsteps is so loved. And to think, what if I mess it up? That's a really scary feeling. You're like, what if I break something that's so beautiful and so wonderful and the team is so wonderful? But now I have so much fun at work every day. I cannot even explain how happy I am that this is my job and my life. And that is the thing that, you're going to take a big leap, but you often just upgrade your life. And like my life is so full of joy with my colleagues, and I'm so proud of what we're building. And I love emailing users and hear how they feel. And it is a real joyful experience for me. So it was worth the big leap, even though it was completely terrifying, moving countries for this and hoping I could do a good job and worrying that I might mess it up. But I've had a lot of very supportive colleagues that have made it a very soft landing, and it's been a real adventure.
Amazing. Find your tribe and find your compounders is what I'm taking away from that. Wonderful. So thank you so much for sharing your journey, Claire. And this was just amazing to hear a beautiful company, a beautiful vision, being led by an amazing leader. And everything that you mentioned about exploration, curiosity, humility is just, playbook for a lot of people who may not have walked this path before. So if there's something that you'd like to leave the listeners with, now would be a good moment to share that.
Yeah, I think curiosity is a lovely thing to lead with as a leader whenever you can. Be curious, and my trick for this is just ask another question. You think you're done, and someone said something to you, especially, I mean, whether it's feedback, whatever it is, ask another question. And I found that that's a really helpful little mantra that I just take with me, and it helps me stay curious.
Great. Thank you, Claire. And thanks for everyone for tuning into BareLead. And if you love this conversation, you can follow or subscribe or leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Music or where you're watching us. I'm Pooja, and I'll see you next time for more raw, stripped down conversations. And until then, keep it real.